and welcome to the loan approval process segment of our home buyer seminar series. My name is Tracy Oliver and I am a realtor with Coldwell Banker.
And I'm Scott Tucker, a senior loan officer with PHH Home Loans.
You know, Scott, when I meet with first-time home buyers, the absolute first step I tell each and every one of those buyers is to meet with a good lender and do a pre-approval.
That is so very important, Tracy. No one should actually start looking to purchase a home until they've actually talked to a lender and determined really how much they can actually qualify to buy. It's very important. That's the most important first step in any process.
You know, Scott, what might be helpful at this point for our first-time buyers is for you to walk us through the pre-approval process and tell us a little bit about the different types of approvals.
The loan approval process is actually, there's three types. First, you can actually be qualified. That's where you actually talk to a lender over the phone. Only takes a few minutes, but talk to a lender over the phone. They pull a copy of your credit report, review and make sure everything is good there. They look at your income and your assets based on what you're telling them you have available to use, and then they will tell you this is what you should be able to do based on the information you provided. That's the easiest and first step that you should probably take. If you wanted to go one step further, you can actually do what's called a loan approval. That's where you actually provide documentation to back up what you said verbally. The documentation is very simple and can be faxed or emailed or scanned and sent to the lender easily, and it only takes a couple of days for that to happen.
Fantastic. And then what's the third one?
And the third one is actually a commitment letter. That's actually the final stage after you have obtained a contract. You are in the midst of purchasing your property. The bank has received all of your documentation. They've done an appraisal on your property, all those things specific to your purchase transaction, and they've said, yes, we're guaranteeing now that we will give you this mortgage, so we're going to provide you a commitment letter or their commitment that they're going to provide you that mortgage.
Perfect. Well, we're not there yet. We're still just trying to get the pre-approval.
Just in the beginning.
So once we have that approval from a lender, usually you provide a letter that the buyer can then give to his realtor and use that when they're ready to buy, write a contract for a house, and we'll get to that in another series.
Exactly.
You mentioned in doing the approval that certain documentation will be required. Can you kind of tell our first-time buyers what type of documentation will be needed?
Certainly. It's actually very simple, and I usually recommend to most of my buyers that you take a folder and put it in a filing cabinet somewhere and start collecting these items and keep them on hand, because you may need them even during the process. Just keep collecting them. Those items include the most recent 30 days worth of pay stubs, the most recent 2 months worth of bank statements or any asset accounts,
okay.
And that includes anything from your checking or savings, your 401ks, your investment accounts. Any of those things are considered to be assets.
Okay.
And third, you're going to look for the federal tax returns, and you want to make sure you have those available along with your W-2s. If you happen to be self-employed, you definitely want to be able to have those tax returns available, because sometimes you will claim unreimbursed business expenses and things like that that may come into the calculation when determining your eligible income to use.
Good advice. Terrific. So you've provided this documentation to the lender. What are the requirements that the lender is going to have for the different types of loans? And I guess a good opportunity to kind of walk us through with a little bit of an overview of the different types of loans that are available to our buyers.
Terrific. There's actually three major categories of loans. There is a Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac type of loan. That's what's called a conventional mortgage. When you see banks advertise rates and things like that, that's pretty much what they're advertising are conventional mortgages. They are actually a little more strict in today's market environment, in today's banking environment. So they're a little more strict on the buyer. They usually require at least 5% down. Most buyers are putting 10 to 20% down with those types of loans. The next category is what's called an FHA loan. In today's market, as you know, FHAs represent probably about 60% of the loans being given today. The reason is because they're actually more lenient on things like credit scores, more lenient on the debt-to-income ratios, definitely more lenient and more suitable to the first-time home buyer.
Lower down payments as well.
Lower down payments as well, a minimum of 3.5%. The third category is if you happen to be a veteran, you can get a VA loan. And those actually allow for 100% financing with no private mortgage insurance for certain veterans that are eligible and have their eligibility, and even for veterans and their spouses.
Good to break that down for us. So we're talking about the loan approval process as being our absolute first step, so this might be a good time to sort of get an idea of what that overall timeline and time frame needed from the lender standpoint, and even how long it takes to actually get an approval.
Well, actually, there's different stages of that. To get a qualification, which is what I mentioned before, you can do over the phone, you can literally do that in 20 minutes or so.
Okay.
Depending on how many questions you may have for your lender, or how difficult or how complicated your financial situation is. It may take a little bit longer than that. But in about 20 minutes, you can actually have a real good idea of what a lender may provide for you in reference to a mortgage.
Okay.
And even the type of mortgage that might work for you.
Okay.
If you go to that next step and get what's called a loan approval, then that's where you're providing that documentation to the lender. Then that may take a day or two to be able to get that approval back in place. But again, not more than a couple of days should that take place.
Okay.
Alrighty?
Good.
And finally, we mentioned the commitment. As I mentioned before, that's kind of after you've gone under contract and you're in that process and waiting to go to closing. That usually happens a little further down the stage of the process, but that actually is provided once everything is done, and then that commitment letter is actually provided.
And it takes, on average, from the pre-approval process, once someone has found a house, then what amount of time does the lender need once you're under contract to actually close a home?
Well, banks are actually looking to have about 30 days in order to get their process complete.
Okay.
So that's standard in the industry. It may be different on your particular scenario. Maybe you need 30 or 60 days. Maybe the seller needs 30 or 60 days. So all that's negotiable within your contract. But a bank really it looks for at least 30 days in order to get you closed.
Terrific, and that's helpful. And as we start this process, to understand how far back we need to sort of back time when we get started. Well, it's clear that the loan approval process is key as the first step, because obviously you need to know how much home you can afford, and then from there be comfortable with those payments within that qualification amount. Well, thank you for breaking that down for us, Scott.
You're welcome, Tracy. And definitely you want to make sure that you are definitely comfortable with your payment. That's one of the most important things in today's lending environment, so you don't have any issues that we've seen over the past couple of years where other buyers have had problems.
Absolutely. It makes sense to get the pre-approval first, know what you're talking about, know what you're comfortable with. Thank you, Scott.